Hello and welcome to today's program brought to you by the U.S. Botanic Garden. My name is Courtney Burrs, the online education specialist with the Learning and Outreach team here at the Garden. We're so happy to have you joining us for Ask an Expert Holiday Poinsettias, this online Q&A with our USBG Advanced Gardener, Howard Luckey. So now, let me introduce our presenter today. Howard Luckey is a gardener at the U.S. Botanic Garden. He's worked with the horticulture exhibits and displays team and a native of Washington, D.C. He has been in the horticulture field since 2015. Howard attended West Virginia University, where he received his BS in agribusiness management and a minor in horticulture. He began his professional career in Ohio, where he produced annuals at a large commercial production company for stores in the Mid-Atlantic. Howard returned to the D.C. area, where he worked as a field manager for a large tree farm for 2 years, and then returned to greenhouse work, joining the U.S. Botanic Garden. We're so happy to have you, Howard. Welcome. Let's get into it. Howard, where are we streaming from today?
So right now we are in USBG production facility in Southwest Washington, D.C. Our main conservatory is right at the foot of the Capitol. But we're at the PF where the magic happens, where all the work happens. This is Zone 11. This is one of our main production houses. We do our poinsettia production in the fall/winter here. And in the spring, we do our spring annual production for our garden and grounds team.
What's new about this year? What do we have exciting going on?
Let's see, what did we do this year? So we did do 2 new cultivars. They're not new to the industry, but new to us. We did Christmas Beauty Princess and Christmas Beauty Queen. They seem to be 2 fan favorites. We got a lot of compliments about them this year. We also did a Tapestry Red, which isn't new to the industry, but new to us here, or at least haven't been grown in the last 5 years.
I can already see that we got some gorgeous things going on there. What are some of your favorite varieties that we have this year?
My favorite is I've got this here. This is the Purple New Glitter. It's a red with some speckling. I really love this one. I love the red, but the white speckle gives it some texture. It's just a different looking. I love a red, a regular traditional red poinsettia, but this gives it just a little bit more oomph, in my opinion. So it's probably my favorite cultivar.
That's gorgeous. So, Howard, and speaking of, you have wonderful taste. And so you are a part of the holiday show design team. Yes. What was the inspiration, or what was part of your inspiration for that beautiful design that we have going on in the garden court?
So the color theme this year is crimson and cream. I got that inspiration from my late father, who was a Kappa. That's a Black fraternity. Their colors are crimson and cream. Another inspiration was the Commanders. I'm a huge Commanders fan. So it's crimson and cream and burgundy and gold. So that's kind of the red and yellow, red and white theme that we got going on.
Very cool. Very cool. We got some Washington, D.C. fans going on here. And it works. It works very well. It's gorgeous. So if you all are in the Washington, D.C. area, please come by to our holiday show. And so we are ready to get into some of the questions from our audience. And so one of the first things that folks want to know about is, how do we keep poinsettias after the holiday? They're enjoying them now in their home, but how do we get them to grow even after the holiday season?
Okay, so first thing I'm going to say, most people either, and this goes not just poinsettias, this is like all houseplants. Most people are either overwatering or underwatering. And generally, from my experience, from what I've seen, overwatering is like the worst thing you can do. If you underwater, obviously, eventually, it's going to dry out and die. But normally you'll notice, okay, it's starting to wilt. I need to water this plant. A lot of people, they like to water, they come up with a schedule. They'll water weekly or whatever. But in a household setting, if it's not getting a lot of sun, if it's not getting a lot of heat, it probably doesn't need to be watered every week. A lot of people that I see, their poinsettias are just have root rot. I would say root rot is one of the main killers of poinsettias. So definitely kind of come up with a good dry down cycle. Really, I like to go by weight, and it's hard to kind of explain over online. But when you pick up your plant after you first watered it, feel it, see how it feels. When you just watered it, the weight that you feel, this is how, a watered poinsettia. Come back every, say 3 or 4 days and just kind of feel how it feels. If it feels significantly lighter, then you might need a water. If it's not that much lighter, then you're probably good. In my experience, I've had a poinsettia in my house. Well, I've had a couple of poinsettias in my house, but I've got about 3 poinsettias in my house. I've had them since before Thanksgiving, and I've only watered them like twice. I know that sounds crazy. It's been a couple weeks since Thanksgiving, but they're just not drying down. And if it's not drying down, you don't need to give it any more water, because if it's just sitting in water, your roots are going to rot, and that'll be your downfall. And once you get root rot, it's done. You might as well throw it out.
Well, speaking of, let's talk about the poinsettia that you had in your hand. She's gorgeous. Tell us about this poinsettia.
So this is a Poinsettia Pure White. It's kind of a low vigor cultivar, so it doesn't get super big. We really like it for its small bracts and very beautiful plant. This is actually a cross. This was made by crossing not a poinsettia, but another euphorbia, which poinsettia is in. This is what they call a dogwood poinsettia. It is not a poinsettia, even though it has poinsettia in the name. It's not a poinsettia pulcherrima, which is what the rest of the poinsettias are. And so you cross this with another variety. You see how this has these small bracts there. You cross this with another variety of poinsettia, and you came up with this. And that's how you come up. That's how they came up with the varieties with the smaller bracts here. And it's a popular cultivar called a Poinsettia series. They come in a bunch of different colors: white, red, pink, and
Now, I noticed that you're saying bracts. Is that the same for those of us who are new to the poinsettia world, or are appreciators, but we don't quite know the scientific term? Are those the leaves? Are those like what we would consider the leaves of a poinsettia? The bract?
So the bract, this bright red that we have here, this is actually a modified stem, I believe. And modified stem. The flowers are right here, these little tiny things. These are the actual flowers, and you can kind of see the pollen there on them.
Yeah.
And the purpose of this modified stem is, since the flower is so small, the bright red is what attracts your pollinators. The little tiny flower, you might not get the attention, but these big, bright, red flower-looking bracts, that's what catches the attention of the pollinators and brings them in.
So speaking of pollinators, I can't help but to think about pollinators in summer. One of our folks asked the question about, can they be put outside in the summer? Like, how do you, once we get through the watering, are poinsettias kind of outside plants? How would they do?
Yeah, so depending on where you are, poinsettias are indigenous to Mexico, so they like the heat. Anything under 55 degrees and they are not going to survive. So during the summer, late spring, you can go ahead and you can take them outside and they'll be fine. They'll grow real well. Obviously, if you're in the middle of the summer, they do like the heat, but they still need water. Don't forget to water it. But yeah, they'll do good. They don't like it extremely hot, so I wouldn't put it like direct sun 14 hours. But yeah, they'll do fine in outside. But once that temperature starts to drop, you have to bring them in. They're very sensitive to cold stress.
Okay. So our folks in Davis, California, they wanted to know if poinsettias can be grown as a landscape plant.
Yeah, so I saw that question. And I did a little bit of research. I literally just Googled this morning what the temperature was in Davis, California, like right now this morning. It's 40 degrees. So my initial reaction was, no, probably not. But I have a colleague who's from California and lived in California, and she said, oh yeah, well, she has seen poinsettias growing in the wild. I would say Davis, like just Googling it, the temperature right now, it's pretty cold. So I want to say no.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing about landscape plants is they start to kind of harden off. So it's possible, but it may not be happy, if that makes sense. You might be able to plant it in Davis and it might survive, but it might not be a beautiful plant or shrub because it's getting those cold temperatures.
Okay.
But it also might just die because, like I said, I saw this morning it gets 40 degrees. Anything under 55, it really doesn't like. So that's kind of like up in the air. I would want to say no, but my colleague has seen it in person, so I can't just say no.
Okay. And so we're going to transition back to indoors in a moment, but I am also eyeballing these humongous poinsettias behind you. How do they grow that tall?
Okay, well, you should know that poinsettias are a shrub. In the wild, they get about 15, 20 feet tall. They can be as big as a house.
Did you say 15 to 20 feet?
Yeah, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
You're talking about the little pretty plants in this pot are actually, wow.
Yeah, they're shrubs. They can get big. In fact, they're so small, like when you buy them commercially, because that's just years of breeding to make them small.
Okay.
What? This is one of our heirloom varieties. Right now, I'm 6 foot. It's well above my head, so I would say this is at least 8 or 9 feet tall. Again, this is one of our heirlooms. So by heirloom, this is like one of the original cultivars that they started breeding. They took stuff like this, and after years and years of years, we came up with the smaller poinsettia that we know of. But if you were to just go out into the wild, or a species version would look just something similar to this, very big. And so that's part of the reason why we grow them like this, to kind of educate the public of, the small little compact shrub that we all think of is really, our plant that we think of is really can be a 20-foot shrub.
Whoa. Okay. Alrighty. So, so we're going to go from outdoors to indoors because my mind is completely blown. What's the best place in the house to keep poinsettias? I know some places folks are wondering about, should you use the steamers? Should you use a very highly, a lot of sun, a little bit of sun? What's the most ideal place?
Well, in your house, if you can get your poinsettia at least 6 hours of indirect sunlight, it would love that. Definitely try to keep it away from your door. Try to keep it away from where cold air is coming in. Like I said, they're very sensitive to cold. It makes me think, whenever I go to the grocery store, first thing you see when you walk into the grocery store is all the poinsettias at the front door. And they typically don't look too good. And that's because they all have cold damage. And that's just from the cold air on them all day from the doors opening and shutting at the grocery store. So just next time you go to the grocery store, if you're in a colder area, take a look at them. They probably look not too good and kind of floppy. That's what cold damage is like. And that's just because they're getting that cold draft all day. So yeah, keep them away from the door, keep them away from a window. I know, like my grandmother, she has radiators in her house. So she likes to put them on the radiator, which is cool, but it dries down like that.
Okay,
so
you gotta get that water flowing if you're gonna do that.
If you want to water them, if you're gonna remember to water them, okay, you can put them by the heat. But I generally tell people, don't put it too close to your heater or source of heat, because then they're gonna dry down faster than you want. And then, but on the opposite end, if you stick them in a cold, damp corner, it's probably not going to dry down at all. So then, if you're going to do that, don't water them too often. And that comes back to earlier when I said getting a sense of your weight. Everybody has their own style of how they kind of figure out watering. I was taught by weight and moisture scales. Don't really worry about the moisture scale, but when you first water a plant, if it feels heavy, that's your standard. You want it to feel some weight, and then just keep coming back and checking it as it starts to feel light. That's when you give it water. But yeah, so don't put it in by the heat, and don't put it by a dark corner either, because that's probably going to give you your 2 issues.
Gotcha. Okay, so when we go back and check on it, right? How often do we need to check on it staying in its original pot? And yep, it looks like somebody from before, one of our registrants from before had that question, and a participant right now has that same question. When are we switching pots?
I mean, best like horticultural excellence, you probably want to do it at least every year, every 2 years. Soil does break down over time,
Uh-huh.
and so your soil breaks down, and then you have more roots. So plants that are in pots for a very long time get root bound or pot bound, and eventually, if you look at a pot bound plant, you can take it out the plant, and it's all roots and no soil. And that's never good because you don't have any really nutrients being held, no moisture being held. So I don't want to say do it every year because it may not need to be done every year. But if you really want to love your poinsettia and give it its best chance, try to do it at least once a year, every year. But definitely after every 2 years. That's just going to give you the best results. I have house plants that have, like, I got from my dad that have been in pots for like 15 years. You know, it's possible, but they're not going to be the happiest. They're not going to look the best. So if you want your best looking plant, try to do it every year, 2 years tops.
Okay. Yes.
And that also comes down to how small your pot's in. If you're in a really tiny, like 4-inch, like if you're in something small like this, you might need to repot sooner.
Okay. And is there anything special we should put in the soil that might help the growth, might help it be happier?
I would say at home, no. If you have like a decently draining soil, I don't want to say Miracle Grow because I don't want to say Miracle Grow, but a basic potting mix like Miracle is fine. It really all comes down to your watering habits. If you have a well-draining soil, it's more forgiving because if you overwater, it's not holding on to that moisture. But it also is nice because if you forget to water, it's not like going to dry down instantly. But I wouldn't, if you're trying to do something at home, I wouldn't overthink it. Just get a nice potting mix and you should be okay.
Okay. And the audience is loving your reference to your grandmom and your family, because plants are very much a family thing. Normally, when our parents and grandparents love these sorts of things, it does get passed down to us. Yeah, that's beautiful. Speaking of folks who are loving plants, we have a friend whose friend who left their plant outside all winter. Now it's holding on for dear life, but what might they be able to do to maybe resuscitate this plant, this poinsettia?
Well, I hope they live in like Florida or California and not up north. But if they're up north, and it's still alive, good for you.
Right. I'm not sure. This is from Jane W. Jane W., if you are here, please feel free to drop in the chat where you are asking from. But
I don't want to overspeak because, like I said, I've seen plants do crazy things. I've seen some tropical plants survive freezes and it should be dead and somehow it's still alive. So I don't want to say that your plant's done because maybe you got an awesome green thumb and you can bring it back. But generally, if you're below 55, you're going to get that cold damage and your plant is going to be really stressed. It may not die, but next year it might come back and not look too good.
Well, okay, but what if we would like to buy other ones for friends, but we've become attached to the ones that we have? So how do you root poinsettia cuttings? Let's say we know that they are on their last leg, but we want to root it. What's our best way of doing that, Howard?
I'm going to do a really quick cutting.
Okay.
This isn't the best cutting, but we're live. So I'm just going to cut this off, right? We're going to forget that bracket there.
Okay.
So whenever I cut something, can y'all see? Whenever you cut something, you always want to try to cut it at the node.
Okay.
So this is a cutting. Typically, when I do cuttings, I like to do a cutting with a growing stem with the apical meristem. This isn't going to grow it straight up. It'll start to branch out.
Oh, my gosh.
So,
why am I
so when you cut it like this, you're going to get it to branch out like this. You're not going to get that single straight up stem. So I generally, when I do my cuttings, I try to find a growing tip and not do cuttings like that. But it is possible. Anyway, here's your plant, or here's your cutting. You can take a simple cutting and just pop it in the soil. You can also take a cutting and put it in water. So anytime, like, I don't know, if my grandmother always used to get little pieces of plant and throw it in a cup of water. That's propagation. That's a form of propagation.
Yeah.
I have a prayer plant that I got from my grandmother. Popped it in some water, it rooted, put those roots in the soil. Now I've got a new plant. I like to do that because it's very simple. You put the plant in the water, you put it in the windowsill, you watch the roots grow.
Yeah.
You gotta refresh your water. One of the most important things is making sure there's fresh water that has oxygen in the water, because if it just sits there, it's gonna rot. But that's what I was saying. You just honestly, if you don't, even if you don't have any rooting hormone, you just want to take your and just kind of put it in the ground. You don't need a whole bunch of leaves. In fact, you're better off just leaving 1 or 2 leaves. Leaves are energy sinks. So when your plant doesn't have any roots, the plant is using more energy to keep these leaves alive than it is collecting energy through photosynthesis. So you're better off just removing these leaves.
Okay. We have a quick question. Please don't lose your thought, but we have a participant who's asking the question that I'm asking as well. Every year, their poinsettia loses all of their leaves. And our participant just throws it out because they figure, oh, it's dead. But based on what you just said, could it be that they lost their leaves because they are sending their energy somewhere else in the plant?
It could be. I mean, and it's going to drop its leaves. They do that. They will revert back, some of them. But if you really want to save your poinsettia, what you want to do is cut it back. And so this is a poinsettia that I cut back this morning right before this thing started. And it looks it looks like this when we first started. But what you do,
so you cut the bracts.
Yeah, and what you want to do is you want to cut it at a node. See, that's basically right above the leaf. You're going to cut it. Right above the leaf, you're going to cut it. Right above the leaf, you're going to cut it. And so what happens is within a couple of weeks or a month or so, it'll start to push out new growth. And so I don't know if y'all can see, I'm kind of just cutting it here.
Yeah, we can see. I mean, my mouth has dropped.
Okay.
So is that a good strategy at the end of the holidays? Is that a good strategy to cut them back? So that
definitely. Definitely. I mean, especially if you want them to come back nice and full the next year.
Yeah.
So we were talking about really big ones. This is probably like a 10-foot poinsettia that I cut back, I don't know, maybe a month ago. And I cut them back right at the nodes. And you can see it starting to push out this new growth here.
Kind of is. If we could try to keep it still for us for about 5 seconds so we can really zoom in.
Is that still?
That's feeling better.
Okay. So I cut it right there, and then it starts pushing out new growth. Okay.
Yeah, the question is, what is the top of, we can't quite see where you're cutting. Clarify like what above the leaf means.
Okay. Here's your plant. Okay. Everywhere a leaf comes out, the stem is a node. Okay. So when you cut, you're gonna want to cut right above the node, just like that.
Right above. So it's almost like that stem is the top of the plant at that point.
Exactly. And you'll start to getting new branching from that cut. And so that's why this was a pot. You can kind of see here. I cut them all back right above the nodes.
Yeah.
And then they'll start to branch out again.
Okay. That was such an important clarification. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Okay. Wow. This is, I think for so many, we want to just let the plant do its thing and maybe we can kind of support it and then it'll come back. But it also sounds like a pro tip is at the end of the holidays, after it has done its thing, to really get it to grow back, some of maybe the top thing we can think about is cutting it back, making sure that we have a new pot and fresh soil for it, maybe in the next couple of months, and making sure that we're keeping it watered and away from
honestly, I would just start with just cutting it back. I wouldn't worry about repotting it.
Okay, just start with cutting it back.
Yeah, because it'll survive without repotting it. But if you repot it and you kind of screw it up, then you might have some issues.
Okay, but cutting it back will be a way that it can regenerate itself.
Yeah.
Okay. That is fascinating. That is fascinating. We have a question about some pests. Okay. White flies tend to be okay, you're familiar. White flies, they tend to attract these white flies. Do you have any recommendations for us?
So here's the thing. The thing about poinsettias is once they start to get their bract formation, you don't really want to spray them.
Okay.
Now, if we're talking about throughout the season, yeah, you can do your white fly, you can spray them, you can do different things. The best thing you can use is a systemic. But if you just Google like systemic for white fly, or if you look up systemic for sapsuckers, that'll help. But if you're talking about this point in the season, if your plant has white fly, you kind of got to live with it. You can't really spray them. I know a lot of people like to use like hort oils or horticultural soaps. Once you get that bract formation, you can't really spray them. Here we use a lot of beneficial insects. We use good bugs to eat the bad bugs. But again, if it's showing color, you pretty much have the pest for the season. If it's going into spring, then you can go ahead and try to spray them.
Okay. And so we have journeyed from outdoor to indoor, and we may even come back to indoor, but we have some folks that have questions about the greenhouse. She says that she waters it often when it's sunny, but she just wants to hear what you all do there.
Okay, so part of what I do is before I water, I kind of go through and we check all our pots. And that's what I come to earlier when I said you feel your weight. You kind of start to get a feel of what your pot should feel like when it's heavy. You get a feel of what your pot should look like when it's light. And so you'll go through and you'll pick up some pots. And if a lot of your pots are feeling light, it's like, okay, I need a water. If you're coming through and a lot of your pots are heavy, it's like, okay, maybe I don't need a water today. Maybe I'll just spot water. I'll hit a couple things. As far as our poinsettia production, we did our poinsettia production on drip, which is just like automated, I don't want to move the camera, but basically they're just like stakes that go into the soil and they drip in instead of like an individual hose and breaker. We do that to try to get a more not commercial, but a uniform crop. So everything gets the same amount of water, everything is the same height, But in your personal greenhouse, generally, if you have a greenhouse, things are going to dry down a lot faster than they would like in your house. So if you're in a greenhouse, you probably need to water a little bit more than say if you're in your like office. Again, like I said, most office plants, house plants are getting overwatered. But I would say get used to like feeling your plants. I know that can get hard if you're growing in like terracotta or if you're growing in like ceramic or things like that because they have weight to it. But growing is just as much an art as it is a science. And so it's kind of like an art of once you're really doing it, you get a feel of how things look, how things feel. You'll learn your plants. You'll know like, okay, this one's really dramatic when it's sunny out. So I'm going to just water it. I don't even have to check it because I know I'm going to hit it. That's kind of like the art of it.
Okay. Speaking of drama, I just love this idea of drama because when I think about the drama that poinsettias have to offer, they have drama in shape and they have drama in color. And I heard that it is an art to getting these colors a particular way. Can you tell us about that?
Goes a lot into breeding.
Okay.
So earlier I was talking a little bit about like this one right here. So this is a Poinsettia. Excuse me, I'm spacing out. This is a Poinsettia, which is a series.
Poinsettia.
Yes, Poinsettia. This is also a Poinsettia. So they look kind of similar, but they have different colors.
Totally different.
And so all that comes from is just different breeding, crossing, a red one. And a lot of your breeding comes from like genetic deficiencies or whatever. So you might have had a red poinsettia that for some reason it was kind of lighter red because it was a genetic defect. And they'll take that and try to breed it with a white one or something and come out with pink. There's different ways of
I've
how we
seen
can
pink poinsettias. I have.
Hmm?
We have them. I've seen pink poinsettias. Now,
I just showed you one.
yes, absolutely. It's pink and beautiful in fuchsia. And that's the thing. Seeing it on screen is beautiful, but seeing it in real life, you really get to see those different shades. Now, is there a pro tip about how much light to give it at a particular time in order for the colors to really come out?
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So poinsettias are photoperiodic, which basically means they can tell when the days are long. When the days get short and it's getting darker earlier, the poinsettia can tell, and it knows, okay, it's time to start changing. We can do that in the greenhouse by shutting the shades, what we have called blackout curtains, and kind of make the house completely black. And basically, you can change it in the middle of the summer if you wanted to, and kind of switch it out. If you're at home, a lot of people have issues with the color change because it doesn't get as much light. And so it's kind of confused. It doesn't know if it needs to be changing, if it doesn't need to be changing. And so I know a lot of people like to, though, put it in their closet. Put it in your closet that you're making sure you're getting in its darkness. So like when you get home from work around 5 o'clock, go ahead and throw it in your closet. And then before you leave in the morning, pull it out the closet. That's a trick you can do to make sure it's getting its full dark cycle.
Wow. And so did you all use any of those techniques this year for to grow our poinsettias, or do we have the perfect breed? We're already A-okay.
So it's funny. So going to school and working commercially, I was taught that like your poinsettias can't get light. It's going to be the end of the world if they get light. It was like beat into my head. Okay. I started at the garden, and we don't use blackout at all. Okay. And it blew my mind. So I don't know why, but I personally think it comes from just the breeding getting better and better and better and better, that they've kind of like bred out the need for absolute darkness. So here at our production facility, we don't have any blackout. Most poinsettia places you go to, they're going to have blackout. We don't do any blackout. We just use natural day cycles, and it's worked fine for us. This year, we did have issues like with our heirlooms. Again, we're talking about breeding. This is one of our older genetics. These didn't change as quickly as we wanted them to. We hadn't experienced that before, but they ultimately did change. So it worked out for us. So I put this is the same thing as the glitter, the speckled one, same exact type of plant. This one has been under light the entire season, and because it's been under light, it never changed. And so just because we're talking about photoperiodism, I had this around. This is what all year. This is what a poinsettia looks like until the days start to get short, and then they start to turn red.
Got it.
So that's cool. I know people are always interested in that, just because people don't realize they're green.
Yes, the drama, the color, the shapes. I know I was just so tickled by seeing the mouse ears and seeing the different shapes of poinsettias that are available at the holiday show and there at the PF.
Yeah, so this isn't mouse ears. This is a rose. Dark, I forgot. It's called a dark rose red. It has a more fancy name, but essentially dark rose red. And so this is another cool one. You don't see these as often. Yeah. But this is like, there's lots of different shapes and colors you can get. But generally, when you start talking about the fancy stuff, you might have to go to like a local florist or something like that.
And we love our local gardens. So that's one of the first places we tell folks to go. Go ahead to those local gardens, to those local nurseries, and see what they have in stock. Howard, this was so much fun, so informative. Thank you so much. You are certainly the expert for poinsettias there. And if you all get to go to any of our community outreach, Howard, you'll also see Howard in our community outreach programs. He's going to do some expertise in our garden. So we had a ball today. Thank you so much. And thanks for giving us a peek into the production facility. You all, to learn about our future online program offerings, please visit USBG programs. If you're in the DC area, and even if not, make a trip. Go see our holiday show. Howard, thank you so much. Thank you all for sharing your afternoon with us. And we'll see you next time.